Good morning 701A and to our professor, Engineer Punzalan, good morning as well. In today's presentation, we will be continuing the presentation on the Philippine Electrical Code Part 1 and I am Jason Gaviola, your first presenter from the second group. I will then be followed by Mr. Frank Alagao and then Mr. Dominic Gazo. So let's start with the Chapter 7 Special Conditions. Emergency Systems. We will be tackling the scope, application of other articles, equipment approval, test maintenance, capacity, transfer equipment, signals and signs. In the emergency systems, we will learn the electrical safety of installation, operation, and maintenance, whereas the emergency systems are consist of circuits, equipment that are intended to supply, distribute, and control electricity for illumination, and as well as for power. To required facilities when normal electrical supply or systems is being interrupted. So question, what are the emergency systems? So emergency systems are those systems that are legally required and classified and classed as emergency by the municipal, state, federal, or other codes. So another question, what it is intended for? So these systems are intended to automatically supply illumination, power, or both. So to the designated areas and equipment in the event of failure of the normal supply or in the event of accident to the elements of a system that is intended to supply, distribute, and control power and illumination that is essential for the safety of the human life. So the emergency systems is very important. So application of other articles. So except as modified by this article, all applicable articles of this code shall apply. Equipment approval. All equipment shall be approved for the use on emergency systems. Test and maintenance. Letter A. Conduct or witness tests. The authority having jurisdiction shall conduct or witness a test of the complete system upon installation and periodically afterward. Letter B. Tested periodically. System shall be tested periodically on a schedule acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction to ensure that the systems are maintained in proper operating system. C. Battery system maintenance. Where battery systems or unit equipments are involved, including batteries used for starting, control, or ignition in auxiliary engines, the authority having jurisdiction shall require periodic maintenance. Letter D. Written record. A written record shall be kept of such tests and maintenance. Letter E. Testing under load. Means for testing all emergency lighting and power system during maximum anticipated load conditions shall be provided. Okay. Next will be 7.0.1.5 capacity. A. Capacity and rating. An emergency system shall have adequate capacity and rating for all loads to be operated and simultaneously. The emergency system's equipment shall be suitable for the maximum available fault current at its terminal. Letter B. Selective load pickup, load shedding, and peak load shaving. The alternate power source shall be permitted to supply emergency, legally required standby, and optional standby system loads where the source has adequate capacity or where automatic selective loads pick up and load shedding is provided as needed to ensure adequate power. 1. The emergency circuits. 2. The legally required standby circuits. 3. The optional standby circuits. In that order of priority. The alternate power source shall be permitted to be used for peak load shaving provided these conditions are met. Peak load shaving operation shall be permitted for satisfying the test requirement of the 7.0.1.4b, provided all other conditions of 7.0.1.4 are met. A portable or temporary alternate source shall be available whenever the emergency generator is out of service for major maintenance or repair. Next, transfer equipment. A. General. The transfer equipment, including automatic transfer switches, shall be automatic, identified for emergency use, and approved by the authority having its jurisdiction. Transfer equipment shall be designed and installed to prevent the inadvertent interconnection. So, inadvertent Transfer equipment shall be designed and installed to prevent the inadvertent interconnection. So, inadvertent means hindi sinasadya. So, inadvertent interconnection of normal and emergency sources of supply in any operation of the transfer equipment. Transfer equipment and electric power production systems installed to permit operation in parallel with the normal source shall meet the requirements of the Article 7.5. Bypass isolation switches. Means shall be permitted to bypass and isolate the transfer equipment. Where bypass isolation switches are used, inadvertent parallel operation shall be avoided. Letter C. Automatic transfer switches. Automatic transfer switches shall be electrically operated and mechanically held. D. Use. Transfer equipment shall supply only emergency loads. 7.0.1.7 Signals. Audible and visual signals devices shall be provided, where practicable for the purpose described in the 7.0.1.7 through 7.0.1.7d. Derangement. To indicate derangement of the emergency, this is the derangement. Letter B. Carrying load. To indicate that the battery is carrying load. C. Not functioning. To indicate that the battery charger is not functioning. Letter D. Ground fault. To indicate a ground fault in solidly grounded Y emergency systems for more than 150 volts to the ground and circuit protective devices rated to 1000 amperes or more. The sensor for the ground fault signals devices shall be located at or ahead of the main system disconnecting means for the emergency source, and the maximum setting of the signal devices shall be for a ground fault current of 1200 amperes. Instructions on the course of action to be taken in the event of indicated ground fault shall be located at or near the sensor location. So, it is important to take note of that. 7.0.1.8 Emergency sources. A sign shall be placed at the service entrance equipment indicating type and location of on-site emergency power sources. Letter B. Grounding. Where the grounded circuit conductor connected to the emergency source is connected to a grounding electrode conductor at a location remote from the emergency source. So, there shall be a sign at the grounding location that shall identify all emergency and normal sources connected at the location. So, it is under the sign and it is for the grounding. Okay, so let's now move on with the 7.0.2 circuit wiring. First will be the wiring emergency systems. First will be the identification. All boxes and enclosures, including transfer switches, generators, and power panels for emergency circuits shall be permanently marked. so they will be readily identified as a component of an emergency circuit system. Letter B, wiring. Wiring of two or more emergency circuits supplied for the same source shall be permitted in the same raceway. Same raceway, cable, box, or cabinet. Wiring from an emergency source or emergency source distribution over current protection to emergency loads shall be kept entirely independent of all other wiring and equipment, unless otherwise permitted in number 1 through number 4. So here are those. Number 1, wiring from the normal power source located in transfer equipment enclosures. 2, wiring supplied from two sources in exit or emergency luminaires. 3, wiring from two sources in a common junction box attached to exit or emergency luminaires. Number 4, wiring within a common junction box attached to unit equipment containing only the branch circuit supplying the unit equipment and the emergency circuit supplied by the unit equipment. Letter C, wiring design and location. Emergency wiring circuits shall be designed and located so as to minimize the hazards that might cause the failure due to the flooding, fire, icing, vandalism, and other adverse conditions. Letter D, fire protection. Emergency system shall meet the additional requirement in the 7.0.2.1 letter D number 1 and letter D number 2, assembly occupancies for not less than 1,000 persons or in buildings above 23 meters in height with any of the following classes: assembly, educational, residential, detention, and correctional, and business mercantile. Number 1, feeder circuit wiring. Feeder circuit wiring shall meet one of the following conditions. Shall meet one of these conditions. First condition will be A. Be installed in spaces or areas that are fully protected by an approved automatic fire suppression system. Letter B. Be a listed electrical circuit protective system with a minimum of 1 hour fire rating. Letter C. Be protected by a listed thermal barrier system for electrical system components. Letter D. Be protected by a fire-rated assembly listed to achieve a minimum fire rating of 1 hour. Letter E. Be embedded in not less than 50 mm of concrete. And letter F. Be a cable listed to maintain circuit integrity for not less than 1 hour when installed in accordance with the listing requirements. Number 2. Feeder circuit equipment. So on the first part, we discuss feeder circuit wiring. That now we are moving on with the feeder circuit equipment. Equipment for feeder circuits including transfer switches, transformers, and panel boards shall be located either in spaces fully protected by approved automatic fire suppression systems, including sprinklers, carbon dioxide systems, or in spaces with a 1 hour fire resistance rating. Sources of power. Okay. 7.0.3.1 General Requirements. Current supply shall be such that in the event of failure of the normal supply or within the building or the group of buildings concerned, emergency lighting, emergency power, or both shall be available within the time required for the application but not exceed to 10 seconds. The supply systems for emergency purposes in addition to the normal services to the building and meeting the general requirements of this section shall be one or more of the types of the systems described in the 7.0.3.1 letter A through 7.0.3.1 E. Unit equipment in accordance with the 7.0.3.1 7.0.3.1 letter F shall satisfy the applicable requirements of this article, the 7.03 sources of power. In selecting an emergency source of power, consideration shall be given to the occupancy and the type of service to be rendered, whether of minimum duration as for evacuation of the theater, or longer duration as for supplying emergency power and lighting due to an indefinite period of current failure from trouble either inside or outside the building. Equipment shall be designed and located so as to minimize the hazards that might cause complete failure due to flooding, fires, icing, and vandalism. Storage battery. Storage batteries used as a source of power for emergency systems shall have a suitable rating and capacity to supply and maintain the total load for a minimum period of 1.5 hours, without the voltage applied to the load falling before 87.5% of the normal. Batteries, whether of the acid or alkali type, shall be designed and constructed to meet the requirements of emergency service and shall be compatible with the charger for the particular installation. For a sealed battery naman, the container shall not be required to be transparent. Okay, so take note of that. For the sealed battery, it is not required for it to be transparent. However, for the lead and battery that requires water additions, transparent or translucent jars shall be furnished. Okay, so we need to take note of this, that automotive type batteries shall not be used as a storage battery for the sources of power. An automatic battery charging means shall be provided. Next, generator set. Generator set as a source of power. First is the prime mover driven. For a generator set driven by a prime mover acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction and size in accordance with the 7.0.1.5, means shall be provided for the automatically starting the prime mover on failure of the normal service, and for automatic transfer and operation of all required electrical circuits. A time delay feature permitting a 15-minute setting shall be provided to avoid retransfer in case of short-time re-establishment of the normal source. Okay, for number 2, internal combustion as prime movers. Where internal combustion engines are used as the prime mover, an on-site fuel supply shall be provided, with an on-premise fuel supply sufficient for the not less than 2 hours full demand operation of the system, where the power is needed for the operation of the fuel transfer pumps to deliver fuel to a generator set day tank. This pump shall be connected to the emergency power system. Okay, so number 3, dual supplies. Prime movers shall not be solely dependent on a public utility gas system for their fuel supply or municipal water supply for their cooling systems. Means shall be provided for the automatically transferring from one fuel supply to another one fuel supply to another where dual fuel supplies are used. So the exceptions for this are where acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction, the use of other than on-site fuel shall be permitted where there is a low probability of simultaneous failure of both the off-site fuel delivery system and the power from the outside electrical utility company. So for the number 4, battery, power, and dampers. Where a storage battery is used for control or signal power or as the means of the starting the prime mover, it shall be suitable for the purpose and shall be equipped with an automatic charging means independent of the generator set, where the battery charger is required for the operation of the generator set. It shall be connected to the emergency system, where power is required for the operation of the dampers used to ventilate the generator set. The dampers shall be connected to the emergency system as well, same as the internal combustion as prime movers. Number 5, auxiliary power supply. Generator sets that require more than 10 seconds to develop power shall be permitted if an auxiliary power supply energizes the emergency system until the generator can pick up the load. Number 6, outdoor generator sets. When outdoor house generator set is equipped with a readily accessible disconnecting means located within the site of the building or structure supplied, an additional disconnecting means shall not be required where ungrounded conductors serve or pass through the building or structure. Letter C. Uninterruptible power supplies. Uninterruptible power supplies used to provide power for emergency systems shall comply within the applicable versions of 7.0.3.1 letter A and 7.0.3.1 letter B. Okay? So letter D, separate service. Where acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction as suitable for use as an emergency source of power, an additional service shall be permitted. This service shall be in the accordance with applicable provisions of the Article 2.30 and the following additional requirements. First additional requirement will be separate service drop or service lateral. Number 2, service conductors sufficiently remote electrically and physically from any other device or any other service conductors to minimize the possibility of simultaneous interruption of the supply. Letter E, fuel cell system. Fuel cell system used as power source for emergency systems shall be of suitable rating and capacity to supply and maintain the total load for not less than 2 hours of full demand operation. Letter F, unit equipment. Individual unit equipment for emergency illumination shall consist of the following. There are 4. First will be a rechargeable battery. Number 2 will be a battery charging means. Number 3 is a provision for one or more lamps mounted on the equipment or shall be permitted to have terminals for remote lamps or both. Number 4 is a relaying device arranged to energize the lamps automatically upon failure of the supply to the unit equipment. 7.0.4 Emergency System Circuit for Lighting and Power. 7.0.4.1 Loads on emergency branch circuits. So, no appliances and no lamps other than those specified as required for emergency use shall be supplied by emergency lighting circuits. So, wala po daw na appliances or no lamps that will be connected or supplied by emergency lighting circuits. 7.0.4.2 Emergency Illumination. Emergency illumination shall include all required means of egress lighting, illuminated exit signs, and all other lights specified as necessary to provide required illumination. Where high intensity discharge lighting such as high and low pressure sodium, mercury vapor, and metal halide is used as the sole source of the normal illumination, the emergency lighting system shall be required to operate until normal illumination has been restored. The exception for this emergency illumination is alternative means that ensure emergency lighting illumination level is maintained shall be permitted. Next is the 7.0.4.3 is the circuits for emergency lighting. Branch circuits that supply emergency lighting shall be installed to provide service from a source complying with the 7.0.3.1 when the normal supply for lighting is interrupted. Such installations shall be provide either of the following. So there are two two given. First will be an emergency lighting supply independent of the general lighting supply with provisions for automatically transferring the emergency lights upon the event of failure of the general lighting system supply. Number 2 is two or more separate and complete systems with independent power supply by which each systems providing sufficient current for emergency lighting purposes only. Okay, so let's now move on with the circuits for emergency power. For branch circuits that supply equipment class as emergency, there shall be an emergency supply source to which the load will be transferred automatically upon the failure of the normal supply. Okay, so that will be the last for these sources of power. Okay, so control emergency lighting circuits. Switch requirements. The switch or switches installed in emergency lighting circuits shall be arranged so that the only authorized persons having control of emergency lighting. So there are two exceptions in here. Exception number 1, where two or more single throw switches are connected in parallel to control a single circuit, at least one of these switches shall be accessible only to authorized persons. So exception number 2, additional switches that act only to put emergency lights into operation but not disconnect them shall be permissible. Next is the 7.0.5.2 switch locations. All manual switches for controlling emergency circuits shall be in locations convenient to authorized persons responsible for the further actuations. In facilities covered by the Articles 5.18 and 5.20, a switch for controlling emergency lighting systems shall be located in the lobby or at the place conveniently accessible thereto. So, in no case shall a control switch for emergency lighting be placed in a motion picture projection booth or on a stage or a platform. For this switch location to be accessible by the permitted person. Next is the overcurrent protection. Accessibility. The branch circuit overcurrent device in emergency circuits shall be accessible to authorized person only. Ground fault protection of equipment. The alternate source for emergency system shall not be required to have ground fault protection of equipment with automatic disconnecting means. Ground fault indication of the emergency source shall be provided per as discussed in the 7.0.1.7 letter D. So 7.0.6.3 coordination, emergency system or systems, overcurrent devices shall be selectively coordinated with all supply side overcurrent protective devices. Article 7. So now we will be moving on with the Article 7.1, the legally required standby systems. So the systems covered by this article consist only of those that are permanently installed in their entirety, including the power source. By which, in definition, legally required standby system, those systems required and so classed as legally required standby by municipal, state, federal, or other codes or by any governmental agency having this jurisdiction. By which these systems are intended to automatically supply power to the selective loads, other than those classed as emergency systems, in the event of failure of the normal source. So, in the application for other articles, except as modified by this article, all applicable articles of this code shall be applied. Equipment approval. All equipment shall be approved for the intended use. Test and maintenance for legally required standby systems. A. Conduct or witness tests. The authority having jurisdiction shall conduct or witness a test of the complete system upon its installation. Letter B. Tested periodically. Systems shall be tested periodically on a schedule and in the manner of acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction to ensure that the systems are maintained in proper operating condition. Letter C. Battery systems maintenance, where batteries are used for control, starting or ignition of the prime movers, the authority having jurisdiction shall require periodic maintenance. Letter D. Written record. A written record shall be kept on such tests and maintenance. Letter E. Testing under load. Okay, so means for testing legally required standby systems under load shall be provided. Capacity and rating. A legally required standby system shall have adequate capacity and rating for the supply of all equipment intended to be operated at one time. Legally required standby system equipment shall be suitable for the maximum available fault current at its terminals. The legally required standby alternates power source shall be permitted to supply both legally required standby and optional standby systems loads under either of the following condition. So the first condition is where the alternate source has adequate capacity to handle all the connected loads. Second condition, where automatic selective loads pick up and load shedding is provided that will ensure adequate power to the legally required standby circuits. Transfer equipment. Transfer equipment including automatic transfer switches shall be automatic and identified for standby use and approved by authority having its jurisdiction. Okay, so bypass isolation switches. Means to bypass and isolate the transfers switch equipment shall be permitted. Where bypass isolation switches are used, inadvertent parallel operations shall be avoided. So, inadvertent means hindi sinasadyang parallel operation shall be avoided. Okay. So, next will be 7.1.1.8 signals. Audible and visual signal devices shall be provided where practicable for the purpose described at 7.1.1.8 letter A and B and letter C. Derangement. To indicate derangement of the standby source. B. Carrying load. To indicate that the standby source is carrying load. Letter C. Not functioning. To indicate that the battery charger is not functioning. 9. Signs. A mandated standby. A sign shall be placed at the service entrance indicating the type and the location of on-site legally required standby power sources. And there is only one exception for this. That is, a sign shall not be required for individual unit equipment as specified in 7.1.3.1, letter G. Letter B, grounding. There shall be a sign at the grounding location that shall identify all legally required standby power and normal sources connected at the location. Okay. Circuit wiring. The circuit wiring of the legally required standby systems. Okay. Okay, so wiring legally required standby systems. The legally required standby system wiring shall be permitted to occupy the same raceways, cables, boxes, and cabinets with other general wiring. The sources of power of the legally required standby system. Okay. First will be the storage battery. A storage battery shall have suitable rating and capacity to supply and maintain not less than 87.5% of the system voltage of the total load of the circuit supplying legally required standby power to a period of at least 1.5 hours. Batteries, whether of the acid or alkali type, shall be designed and constructed to meet the service requirements of the emergency service and shall be compatible with the charger for the particular installation. In the other hand, for a sealed battery, the container shall not be required to be transparent. However, for the lead acid battery that requires water and additions, transparent or translucent jars shall be furnished. And same as the earlier, automotive type battery shall not be used as a legally required standby system. An automatic battery charging means shall be provided. Letter B. We will be talking about generator sets. For the first type of generator set, that would be the prime mover driven. For a generator set driven by a prime mover, acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction and sized in the accordance with the 7.1.1.6 means shall be provided for the automatically starting the prime mover upon failure of the normal service. A time delay feature permitting a 15-minute setting shall be provided to avoid retransfer in case of a short-time re-establishment of the normal power source. Second type is the internal combustion engines as a prime mover. Where internal combustion engines are used as the prime mover, an on-site fuel supply shall be provided with an on-premise fuel supply sufficient for not less than 2 hours full demand operation of the system. Third type is the dual fuel supply. Prime movers shall not be solely dependent on a public utility gas system for their fuel supply or municipal water supply for their cooling systems. Means shall be provided for the automatically transferring one fuel supply to another where dual fuel supplies are used. 4. Battery power. Where a storage battery is used for control or signal power or as the means of starting as a prime mover, it shall be suitable for the purpose and shall be equipped with an automatic charging means independent of the generator set. Uninterruptible power supplies. The uninterruptible power supply shall comply with the applicable provisions of the 7.1.3.1 letter A to letter B. Separate service. Where acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction as a source of power, an additional service shall be permitted. This service, the separate service, shall be in accordance with the applicable provisions under the Article 2.30. With separate service drop or lateral sufficient remote electrically and physically from any other service to minimize the possibility of simultaneous interruption of supply from an occurrence in other service. Letter E. Connection ahead of service disconnecting means. So, it is located ahead of and not within the same cabinet enclosure or vertical switchboard section as the service disconnecting means shall be permitted. So, the legal required standby service shall be sufficiently separated from the normal main source. Letter F. Fuel cell systems. Fuel cell systems used as a source of power for legally required standby systems shall be of a suitable rating and capacity to supply and maintain the total load for not less than 2 hours of full-time demand operation. These shall meet the requirements of parts of the 6.92.2 through the 6.92.8. So, it shall not serve as the sole source of the power for the legally required standby system. Letter G, unit equipment. Individual unit equipment for legally required standby illumination shall consist of the following. Therefore, 1 is a rechargeable battery, 2 is a battery charging means, 3rd is a provision for 1 or more lamps mounted at equipment and shall be permitted to have terminals for remote lamps. 4. A relaying device arranged to energize the lamps automatically upon failure of the supply to the unit equipment. So the battery shall be of the suitable rating and capacity to supply and maintain at not less than the 87.5% of the nominal battery voltage for a total lamp load associated with a unit period of at least 1.5 hours. So the unit equipment shall be permanently fixed in place and the flexible cord does not exceed to 900 mm in length. Okay, so for the overcurrent protection, accessibility, the branch circuit overcurrent device in legally required standby circuits shall be accessible to authorized persons only. The ground fault protection of equipment, the alternate source for legally required standby system shall not be required to have ground fault protection of the equipment. For the coordination, it shall be selectively coordinated with all supply side overcurrent protective devices. Okay, so for our next article, Article 7.2, the optional standby system. We are done with the legally required standby system and now we are at optional standby system. So we're in the scope. These are applied to the installation and operation of the optional standby systems, by which it includes prime movers and those that are arranged for connection to a premises wiring system for a portable alternate power supply. By which in definition, where life safety does not depend on the performance of the system, optional standby systems are intended to supply on-site generated power to selective loads, either automatically or manually. Application of the other articles. All applicable articles of this article shall be applied. Equipment approval. All equipment shall be approved for the intended use for the optional standby systems. Capacity rating. Adequate capacity. The optional standby system shall have adequate capacity and rating for the supply of all equipment intended to be operated at one time. Optional standby systems equipment shall be suitable for the maximum available fault current at its terminals. The user of the optional standby system shall be permitted to select the load connected to the system. Transfer equipment. Transfer equipment shall be suitable for the intended use and designed and installed so as to prevent the inadvertent interconnection of normal and alternate sources of supply in any operation of the transfer equipment. Transfer equipment located on load side of the branch circuit protection shall be permitted to contain supplementary overcurrent protection having an interrupting rating sufficient for the available fault current that the generator can deliver. For the signals, audible and visual signals devices shall be provided where practicable for the following purposes. There are two purposes. First is for the derangements, to indicate derangement of the optional standby source. Number 2, carrying load, to indicate that the optional standby source is carrying load. For the signs, a sign shall be Okay, for the sign, a sign shall be placed at the service entrance equipment that indicates the type and the location of on-site optional standby power sources. A sign shall not be required for individual unit equipment for standby illumination. Grounding. Where the grounded circuit conductor connected to the optional standby power source is connected to a grounding electrode conductor at a location remote from the optional standby power source, there shall be a sign at the grounding location that shall identify all the optional standby power source and the normal sources connected at their locations. At that location. Circuit wiring. Wiring optional standby systems. The optional standby systems wiring shall be permitted to occupy the same raceways, cables, boxes, and the cabinets with other general wirings. Grounding. The portable generator grounding, there are two. A. First will be the separated derived systems. It shall be grounded to a grounding electrode in accordance with the 2.5.2.11. So, letter B, non-separately derived system. The first is separately derived system, then now non-separately derived system, where a portable optional standby source is used as a non-separately derived system. The equipment grounding conductor shall be bounded to the system grounding electrode. 7.2.4 is the sources.
Okay, so in guys, good day everyone. I am Frank Alagaw, the second reporters of PEC 1, Chapter 7. So here's the continuation of Chapter 7. Article 7. Panex nga pre. Article 7.27, Instrumentation Tray Cable, Type ITC. Article 7.27.11, Scope. This article covers the use, installation, and construction and specification of instrumentation tray cable for application to instrumentation and control circuits operating at 150 volts or less and 5 amperes or less. So, bali yung instrumentation cable guys, ito yung cable na merong multiple conductor or wires. So, madalas ginagamit to sa sa mga industrial environment. Then this cable designed for power and signal transmission. Next is definition. Type ITC instrumentation tray cable, a factory assembly of two or more insulated conductors with or without a grounding conductors enclosed in a non-metallic stent. 3. Other articles. In addition to the provision of these articles, installation of type ITC cable shall comply with other applicable articles of this code, such as Articles 2.4, 2.5, 3.0, and 3.92. Uses permitted. Type ITC cable should be permitted to be used as follows in industrial establishment, where the condition of maintenance and supervision ensure that only licensed electrical practitioner or non-licensed electrical practitioner under the supervision license electrical practitioner service the installation, including dito yung in cable trays, in raceways, tsaka in hazardous location as permitted in 5.1, 2.1, 5.2, 2.1, 5.3, 2.1. Next graph. Uses permitted. Uses that permitted. Next nga pre. Hindi nagdinig sa akin. Yan, okay na pre. Uses not permitted. Type ITC cable shall not be installed on circuits operating at more than 150 volts or more than 5 amperes. Installation of type ITC cable with other cable shall be subject to standard provision of the specific articles for the other cables. Where the governing articles do not contain standard provision for installation with type ITC cable, the installation of type ITC cable with the other cable shall be not permitted. So, construction. Bali sa construction, guys, yung 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 type ITC cable shall be in size 22 American wire gauge through 3.5 millimeter squared or 2.0 millimeter diameter, guys. The conductor material shall be copper or thermocouple alloy. Insulation on the conductor shall be rated for 300 volts. Then yung shielding shall be permitted. Next is marking. The cable shall be marked in accordance with 3.10, 1.11, A2, A3, A4, and A5. Tapos yung voltage rating shall not be marked on the table. Then yung allowable ampacity naman ng ITC cable of the conductor shall be 5 amperes. Except pa dito yung 22 AWG conductors na meron siyang allowable ampacity na 3 amperes. Di pre, pabalik pre, di pa tapos. Pabak nga ulit. Next is yung overcurrent protection. So sa overcurrent protection naman shall not exceed 5 amperes for 20 AWG and larger conductor. Then yung 3 amperes naman para siya sa 22 AWG conductors. Next, bends. Bends in type ITC cable shall be made so as not to damage the cable. So pa-next nga. Yan, fire alarm na. Article 7.6, fire alarm system. So fire alarm system is designed to alert us to an emergency so that we can take action to protect ourselves, staff, and general public. So kadalasan makikita natin yung fire alarm system sa mga offices, factories, and public buildings. They are part of our everybody routine but are often overlooked until there is an emergency, in which point they might just save our lives. So, Article 7.61, Scope. This article covers the installation of wiring and equipment of fire alarm system, including all circuits controlled and powered by fire alarm system. So, definitions. Number one is yung abandoned fire alarm system. So installed fire alarm cable that is not terminated at equipment other than connector and not identified for future use with a tag. So next yung fire alarm circuit. So the portion of the wiring system between the load side of overcurrent device or the power limited supply lumiit pre. Or the power limited supply and connected equipment of all circuits powered and controlled by the fire alarm system. So fire alarm circuits are classified as either non-power limited or power limited. Next is yung fire alarm circuit integrity cable or CI. So cable used in fire alarm system to ensure continued operation of critical circuits during a specified time under the fire condition. So next is yung non-power limited fire alarm or yung NPLFA. So a fire alarm circuit powered by source that complies with Article 7.6 and Article 7.6.23. So, next is yung Power Limited Fire Alarm Circuit or PLFA. A fire alarm circuit powered by a source of complies with 7.6.3.1. So, yung other articles niya, circuits and equipment should comply with 7.6.18 through 7.6.13. F. Only those section of Article 3.0 reference in this article shall apply to fire alarm system. So, yung A or yung una is spread of fire of combustion, section 3.0.121. So, the assembly portion of abandoned fire alarm cable shall be removed. Next is yung ducts, plenums, and other air handling spaces, section 3.0.1, were installed in ducts or plenums or other spaces used for environment air. Next is hazardous classified location. Articles 500 through 516 and Part 5.17 were installed in hazardous classified location. Next yung corrosive damp or wet location. So section 1.10.1.11 were installed in corrosive damp or wet location. Letter E is building control circuits. So Article 7.25 were building control circuits. Example is yung elevator capture, fan shutdown are associated with fire alarm system. So, and lastly is optical fiber cables. Pabalik ka para sa pangalawa. Yan. And lastly is optical fiber cable. So where optical fiber cable are utilized for fire alarm circuit, the cable shall be installed in accordance with Article 7.7. So balik nga pre. Article 7.6.1, access to electrical equipment behind panels designed to allow access. So, access electrical equipment shall not be denied by an accumulation of conductors and cables that prevents removal or panels including suspended ceiling panels. So, next is yung Article 7.6.18. So, mechanical execution of work. So, fire alarm circuit shall be installed in a neat workman-like manner. Cables and conductors installed exposed on the surface of ceiling and sidewalls shall be supported by building structure in such a manner that the cable will not damage by normal building use. Such cable shall be supported by straps, staples, hangers, and or similar fittings designed and installed so as not to damage the cable. So, next is yung number 9, fire alarm circuits and equipment grounding. Fire alarm circuit and equipment grounding shall be grounded in accordance with Article 2.5. So next is yung fire alarm circuit identification. Fire alarm circuit shall be identified at terminal and junction location in a manner that will prevent an intentional interface with the signaling circuit during testing and servicing. So, number 11 is yung fire alarm circuit extending beyond one building. Fire alarm limited the fire alarm circuits that extend beyond one building and runs after either shall meet the installation requirements of limited fire alarm circuits that extend beyond building and run others shall meet the installation requirements. So next yung NPLFA circuits power source requirements. The power source of non-limited fire alarm circuit shall comply with chapters 1 through force, and the output voltage shall not be more than 600 volts. Nominal the circuit shall not supply through ground fault circuits interrupts or arc fault circuits interrupts. Next is yung 7.6.25 NFLA circuits wiring method. Installation of non-power limited circuits shall be accordance in 1.1.3b and other appropriate articles of chapter 3. So, next nga pre. So next is yung article 7.6.2 6 conductors of different circuits in the same cable, enclosure or raceway. Class 1 with NPLFA circuits or non-power limited fire alarm circuits shall be permitted to occupy the same cable, enclosure or raceway without regards to whether the individual circuits are alternating current or direct current, provided all conductors are insulated for the maximum voltage of any conductor in enclosure raceway. So letter B is fire alarm with power supply circuits. Power supply and fire alarm circuits conductor shall be permitted in the same cable, enclosure, or raceway only where connected to the same equipment. So next is yung Article 7.6.2 NPLFA circuits conductors. So A is yung size and use. So only copper conductor shall be permitted to be used for fire alarm system. Yung size niya is 18 American wire gauge and 16 American wire gauge conductors shall be permitted to be used. So provided they supply loads that do not exceed the capacities given in the table are installed in a raceway. So unapproved enclosure or a listed table conductors larger than 16 AWB shall not supply loads greater than capacities given as applicable. So letter B is insulations. So insulation on conductor shall be suitable for 600 volts. Next is conductor material. So conductor material shall be solid or stranded copper. So Article 7.6.28 number of conductors in cable trays and raceways operating. So NPLFA circuits and class 1 circuits were only non-power limited fire alarm circuits and class circuits conductor are in raceways. So the number of conductors shall be determined in accordance with 3.0.1. So the derating factor given is in 3.1b. Shall apply if such conductor carry continuous load in excess of 10% of capacity of each conductor. Next is yung power supply conductors and fire alarm circuits conductors. So where supply conductors and fire alarm circuit conductors are permitted in raceway. So number one to all conductors where fire alarm circuits conductor carry continuous load in excess of 10% of capacity of each conductor and where the total number of conductor is more than 3. So, yung pangalawa, to the power supply conductors only where the fire alarm circuits conductors do not carry continuous loads in excess of 10% of the capacity of each conductor and where the number of the power supply conductors is more than 3. So letter C is cable trays. Where fire alarm circuit conductor are installed in cable trays, they shall comply with 3.92.1 and Article 3.92.111. So, Article 7.6.2.10 multi-conductor and PLFA cables or multi conductor non-power limited fire alarm cables that meet the requirements of 7.6.4 shall be permitted to be used on fire alarm circuits operating at 150 volts or less. Letter A is yung NPLFA wiring method. Multi-conductor or non-power limited fire alarm circuits cable shall be installed in accordance with 7.6.2 A1, 2, and 3. So yung una is expose or fish in concealed spaces in raceway or exposed on surface of ceiling and side walls or fish on concealed spaces. So cable splices or termination shall be made on listed fitting boxes, enclosure, fire alarm devices, or utilization equipment. Where installed exposed cable shall be adequately supported and installed in such way the maximum protection against physical damage afforded by building construction such as baseboards, door frames, ledge, and port were located within 2,100 millimeter of the floor. So yung cable shall be secure, fastened in approved manner at interval of more than 450 millimeter. So number 2 is yung through a floor or wall. In metal raceways or rigid non-metallic conduit were passing through a floor or wall to a height of 2,100 millimeter above the floor unless adequate adequate protection can be afforded by building construction such as detailed in Article 7.6.2A yung kanina sinabi ko. Or unless or equivalent solid guard is provided. So yung pangatlo in hoistway, in rigid metal conduit or rigid non-metallic conduit, intermediate metal conduit, liquid, tight, flexible non-metallic conduit, or electrical metallic tubing were installed in hoistways. So letter B is yung application of listed NPLFA cables. The use of non-power limited fire alarm circuit cable shall be complied with 7.6.2B1 through B4. So yung una is ducts and plenums. So multi-conductor non-power limited fire circuits cable type NPLFP, NPLFR, and NPLF shall not install exposed in ducts plenums. So yung pangalawa nun is yung other spaces used to environment air cables installed in other spaces used to environmental air shall be type of NPLFP. So yung pangatlo is riser. Cables installed in vertical runs and penetrating more than one floor or cables installed in vertical runs in shaft shall be type NPLFR floor penetration requiring type NPLFR shall contain only cable suitable for riser plenum use. Next, yung pang-apat is yung other wiring within buildings. Cable shall installed in buildings location other than locations covered in yung Article 7.6.210B. So next is yung Article 7.6.3 power limited fire alarm or PLFA circuits. So 7.6.3, one power source for PLFA circuits. So the power source of a power limited fire alarm circuit shall be as specified of in 7.6.3 A, B, or C. So these circuits shall not supply through ground fault circuits, interrupter, or arc fault circuits. So bali mamimili lang ako sa tatlo. Yung una is yung transformer, pangalawa is power supplies. Then yung listed equipment, yung pangatlo. So sa listed equipment, guys, mark to identify the PLFA power source. So 7.6.3 Article 7.6.3 to circuits making. So equipment supplying PLFA circuit shall be durably marked where plainly visible to indicate each circuits. That is a power limited fire alarm circuits. So next is yung Article 7.6.3.11, wiring methods on supply slide of the PLFA power source. Conductors and equipment on the supply sides of the power source should be installed in accordance with the appropriate power. So next yung Article 7.6.3, wiring methods and materials on load slide of the PLFA power source. So fire alarm circuits on the load slide of the power so it shall be permitted to be installed using wiring methods. Next is A, NPLFA wiring method and materials. Installation shall be accordance with 7.6.2 and conductor shall be solid or stranded copper tulad ng sinabi ko kanina. So, pangalawa is yung PLFA wiring methods and materials. So, power limited fire alarm conductors and cables described in 7.6.4 shall be installed as detailed. So, next is, yung last is yung 7.6. Article 7.6.3.15. So, separation from electric, light power, class 1 NPLFA, and medium power network, powered broadband, and communication circuits conductor. So, in general, power limited fire alarm circuits cables and conductor shall not be placed in any cables, tray, compartment, enclosure, manhole, outbox, device box, raceways, or similar fitting with conductors of electric light. So, letter B is separated by barriers. So, power limited fire alarm circuits cable shall be permitted to be installed together with class 1 non-power limited fire alarm and medium power network powered broadband communication circuits where they separated by barrier. So next one is yung raceway within enclosure. So in enclosure, power limited fire alarm circuit shall be permitted to be installed in raceways within the enclosure to separate them from class 1. So non-power limited fire alarm and medium power network powered broadband communication circuits. Letter D is associated system with enclosure. So power limited fire alarm conductors in compartment, enclosure, device boxes, outlet boxes, or similar fitting shall be permitted installed with electric light power. So class 1 non-power limited fire alarm and medium power network powered broadband communication circuits where they are introduced solely to connect the equipment connected to the power limited fire alarm circuits and comply with either the following condition. So yung unang condition niya is yung the electric light power, class 1 non-power limited fire alarm and medium power network powered broadband communication circuits conductor are routed to maintain a minimum of 6 mm separation from the conductors and cables of power fire alarm circuit. So yung pangalawang condition naman yun, the circuits conductor operate at 150 volts or less to ground. So letter E is yung parang nga pre. So letter E is yung enclosure with a single opening. So power limited fire alarm circuits conductor entering compartment enclosure device boxes, outlet, or similar fitting shall be permitted to be installed with electric like power, class 1 non-power limited fire alarm, and medium power network, power broadband communication circuits where they are introduced solely to connect the equipment connected to the limited power circuits to other circuits controlled by the fire alarm system to which the other conductors in the enclosure connected, where the power limited fire alarm circuits conductors must enter to enclosure that provided with a single opening. So they shall be permitted to enter through a single fitting such as T. So provided the conductors are separated from conductors or other circuits by continuous and firmly fixed conductors. So letter F is yung hoistway. In hoistway or power limited conductor shall be permitted in rigid metal conduit, rigid non-metal conduit, and intermediate metal conduit, liquid tight flexible non-metal conduit, or electric metallic tubing. So for elevators or similar equipment, this conductor shall be permitted to be installed provided by the article 6.0.31. So yung last is yung other applications. So for other applications, power limited fire alarm circuit shall be separated by at least 50 millimeter from conductors of any electric light. So power class 1 non-power limited fire alarm or medium power network powered broadband communication circuits unless one of the following condition is met. So yung unang condition is either A or all electric light power or non-power limited fire alarm in medium power network broadband communication circuits conductors. So all the power limited fire alarm circuits conductors are in raceway or in metal sheet head, metal clad non-metallic sheet head of type UF cables. So next is Article 7.6.3 16. So installation of conductors of different circuits class 2 and communication circuits in the same cable, enclosure or raceway. So una is yung 2 or more VLFA circuits. Cable and conductors of 2 or more power limited fire alarm circuits, communication circuits or class 3 circuits shall be permitted with the same cable enclosure or raceway. So B is class 2 circuits with PLFA circuits. Conductors of one or more class 2 circuits shall be permitted within the same cable, enclosure or raceway with conductors of power limited fire alarm circuits, provided that insulation of class 2 circuits conductors in the cable. Letter C is power network powered by broadband communication cables or PLFA. So low power network powered broadband communication circuit shall be permitted in the same enclosure or raceway with PLFA cables. Letter D is audio system circuits and PLFA circuits. Sa audio system circuits described in 6.4.1 C and installed using class 2 or 3 wiring methods in compliance with 7.25. So shall not be permitted to be installed in the same cable or raceway with power limited conductors or cable. Next nga. Ito na pala. Tama lang pala. So next is Article 7.6.3, 17 conductors. Conductor size. So yung conductor size niya is 26 American wire gauge shall be permitted only where it supplies with a connector listed suitable for 26 American wire gauge to 24 American wire gauge or larger conductor that are terminated on equipment or where the 26 AWG conductors are terminated on equipment listed as suitable for 26 AWG conductors. So, single conductor shall not smaller than 18 AWG or American wire gauge. So next is yung Article 7.6.3 support of conductors. So power limited fire alarm circuits conductor shall not strap, tape or attach by any means to exterior of any conduit of other raceware as a means of support. So 7.6 Article 7.6.3 current carrying continues the type fire detector. So yung una is yung applications listed continuous line type fire detector including insulated copper tubing of pneumatically operated detector. So employed for both detection and carrying signaling, current shall be permitted to be used as powered circuit. So pangalawa yung installation. So continuous line type fire detector should be installed in accordance with Article 7.6 through Article 7.6.3. Next is yung Article 7.6.321, application of listed PLFA. Dun lang ulit to. Yan. Last tayo. So, PLFA cable shall comply with requirements described in either 7.6. So, una is plenum. Cable installed in ducts, plenum, and other spaces uses for environmental aid should be type PLF, P, AFPLP. Next is yung riser. Cable installed riser shall be as described in either 1, 2, 3. So, yung other cable shall not installed in metal raceway or located in a fireproof shop having fire stop at each floor. Next, yung other wiring within building. So, and last is yung fire alarm substitution. So, the substitution of fire alarm cables listed in Table 7.6 shall be permitted, so where substitute cables are installed. The wiring requirements of Part 7.6.1 and 7.6.3 shall apply. Next is yung next na please. So next article is listing requirements. Article 7.6.4. So Article 7.6.41, listing and marking of NPLF cables, non-powered fire alarm cables installed as wiring within buildings shall be listed accordance with 7.6.41 A, B, and as being resistance to the spread of fire accordance with 7.6.4 C. So yung una is yung A, NPLFA conductors, materials, NPLFA conductor materials. So conductor shall be 18 American wire gauge or larger solid and stranded copper. So letter B is insulated conductor. So insulated conductor shall be suitable for 600 volts. Insulated conductors 2.0 millimeter squared or 1.6 millimeter diameter. And larger shall be one of the type listed in the table of 3.10. So, or one that is identified for this use. Insulated conductors or 18 American wire gauge and 16 American wire gauge should be in accordance with 7.6. Letter C is type NPLFP. Type NPLFP or non-power limited fire alarm cable for use in other space used for environmental air shall be listed as being suitable for use in other space used environment air as described of 3.0.1 and shall also be listed having adequate fire resistant and low smoke producing characteristics. So letter D is type NPLFR. So type NPLFR or non-power limited fire alarm riser cable shall be listed as being suitable for use in vertical line in a shop or from floor to floor and shall be listed having resistant characteristics. Capable preventing and carrying from floor to floor. So letter E is yung type of NPLF or non-power limited cable. Next nga. Ay, dun lang pala. Ano na pala tayo? Article 7.7. Pabakulit free. Yan. So sa Article 7.7 or optical fiber cable and raceway. So sa scope is the provision of this article apply to installation of optical fiber raceway. This article does not cover the construction of optical fiber cables raceway. So definitions, number one is abandoned optical fiber cable. So installed optical fiber cable that is not terminated at equipment other than connector and not identified for future use with a tag. Pangalawa is yung exposed. So the circuits in such position that in case of failure supports an insulation contact. Next is optical raceway. A raceway designed for enclosing routing listed optical fiber cable. So next is yung point of entrance. The point which cable emerged from the external wall from concrete slab from metal conduit and intermediate metal grounded to an electrode. So other articles, so sa other articles is circuits and equipment shall comply with 7.7.1. Only those sections of articles of 300 reference in this article shall apply to optical fiber cable and raceway. So A is next nga. So yun, yung A is ano, so yung A is spread of product confusion. So direct for electrical installation, shall also supply the installation of optical fiber cables in raceway. So the accessible portion of abandoned optical fiber cable shall be removed. Pangalawa is duct plenums and other air handling spaces. So next is Article 7.7.1, optical fiber cable. So optical fiber cable transmit light for control, signaling, and communication through an optical fiber. So yung Article 7.7.19 types optical fiber cable can be grouped into three. So which such as is non-conductive, conductive, and composite. So yung una is yung non-conductive. So this cables contains of no metallic member and no other electricity conductive materials. So sa conductive naman ito yung cables that contains of non-current carrying conductive members such as metallic strength members. So metallic vapor barriers and metallic armor or stealth. So yung pangatlo is yung composite. So this cable contain optical fibers of current carrying electrical conductors and shall be permitted to contain of non-current carrying conductive members such as metallic strength members and metallic vapor barriers. Composite optical fiber cables should be classified as electrical cables in accordance with the type of electrical conductors. So next is Article 7.7.1, raceways for optical fiber cable. So yung una is yung listed Chapter 3 raceways. So this cable shall be permitted to be installed in any type of listed raceway permitted in Chapter 3. So where that listed raceways is installed in accordance to with Chapter 3, where optical fiber cables are installed within raceway without current carrying conductors. So the raceway field tables of Chapter 3 and Chapter 9 shall not apply where non-conductive optical fiber cables installed were electric conductors in a raceway. B is yung optical fiber raceways. Optical fiber raceways or listed optical fiber cable shall be permitted to be installed in listed plenum optical fiber raceway, listed riser optical fiber raceways, or listed general purpose fiber raceway. So letter C is yung interduct. Listed plenum optical fiber raceway or listed riser optical fiber raceway or listed general purpose of optical fiber raceway installed in accordance of 7.7.3 shall be permitted to be installed in inner duct in any type of listed raceway permitted in Chapter 3. Letter D is entering buildings. So next is yung Article 7.7.1, access to electrical equipment behind panels designed to allow access. Electrical equipment shall not be denied by accumulation of the cables that prevents removal and panels, including suspended ceiling panels. So next is Article 7.7, 1.20, 1.24. So mechanical execution of work. Optical fiber cable should be installed in a neat and workman-like manner. So cable should be installed exposed on surface of ceiling, side walls should be supported by building structure such as manner the cable will not be damaged by normal building use. So next one is Article 7.7.2.1, grounding of entrance cables. So grounding of entrance cables were exposed to contact with electric light or conductor the non-current carrying metallic members optical fiber cable entering building shall be grounded as close to point entrance practicable or shall interrupt close to the point of entrance practicable by insulating joint equivalent device. So next is yung Article 7.73, cables with buildings. So cables with buildings, pero siyang installation of marking listed optical fiber cables. So listed optical fiber cables shall be installed by wiring within buildings. Next one is yung Article 7.7.42, application of listed optical fiber cables and raceways. Una is yung plenum, so cables installed in dock plenums and other spaces used for environmental aid shall be type of ONFP or OFCP. Abandoned cables shall not permitted to remain. Pangalawa is yung fiber. Cable installed riser shall be described in any following. So, yung una is cable installed in vertical runs penetrating more than one floor or cables installed vertical runs in a shop. So, pangatlo is other wiring with buildings. Other wiring with buildings shall be permitted to be installed in listed general purpose optical fiber raceways. Pang-apat yung hazardous or classified location. So, cable installed in hazardous classified location shall be in any type of indicated. Letter E is cable trace and letter F is cable substitutions. So next is Article 7.7.41, optical fiber cable. So yung una is type OFND and OFCD or non-conductive and conductive optical fiber plenum cable shall be listed as being suitable for use in ducts, plenum, and other space used for environmental air and shall also listed to having adequate fire resistant and lowering smoke producing. Next is yung types OFC or non-conductive optical fiber cables and C is type of OFNG and OFCG or non-conductive and conductive general purpose optical fiber cables. The next is yung OFN and OFC or non-conductive and conductive optical fiber cables. So Article 7.8, closed loop and program power distribution. So first is scope. The provision of this article apply to premise power distribution system jointly controlled by signaling between the energy controlled equipment, utilization equipment. So yung other articles naman is except as modified by requirements of this article. All All other applicable of this code shall be applied. Next is yung B, yung component parts. All equipment and conductors shall be listed and identified. So, Article 7.8.13 control. The control equipment and all power switching device operated by the control equipment shall be listed and identified. The system shall be operated according with Article 7.8.13A through D. So, yung first is characteristic electrical identified required. So, outlet shall not energize unless the utilization equipment first exhibits a characteristic electrical identification. Next is B, yung condition for the energization. Outlet shall be de-energized when any of the following occur. So, yung una is yung a nominal operation acknowledged signal is not being received from utilization equipment. Pangalawa is a ground fault condition exists. Pangatlo is an overcurrent condition exists. So, pag ano daw, mataas na yung current. So, letter C is addition and condition for the energization when an alternative source of power is used. In addition, the requirements in 7.8.13b, outlet shall be de-energized when the following condition occurs. So, yung una is the grounded conductor is not properly grounded. Pangalawa is yung any ungrounded conductor is not nominal voltage. So, next is yung letter D, yung controller malfunction. In the event of controller malfunction, all associated outlets shall be de-energized. So, next is Article 7.8.1, power limitation in signaling circuits not exceed of for 24 volts. So, the current required shall not exceed 1 ampere where protected by an overcurrent device or an inherent limited power source. So, next is yung Article 7.8.1, 6 cables and conductors. So, yung una is yung hybrid cables. So, listed hybrid cables consisting of power communication and signaling conductor shall be permitted under a common jacket. So, the jacket shall be applied so as separated the power conductors from communication and signaling conductors. An optional outer jacket shall be permitted to be applied. The individual conductors of a hybrid cable shall conform to the code provision applicable to their current, voltage, insulation rating. So the signaling conductor should not be smaller than 24 American wire gauge copper. So yung letter B naman is yung cables conductors in the same cabinet, panel or box. The power communication and signaling conductors of listed hybrid cable are permitted to occupy the same cabinet, panel or outlet box, or similar enclosure housing the electrical termination of electric light or power circuits only if connectors specifically listed for hybrid cable are employed. So, yung last articles na i-report ko is yung Article 7.8.17 or non-interchangeability or receptacles. Cord connector and attachment plugs used on closed-loop power distribution system should be constructed so that they are not interchangeable with other receptacles, cord connectors, and attachment plugs. So, yun lang po. Thank you po.
So thank you, Mr. Frank Alaga, for the continuation of the part of Group 2.
Hello, good day everyone. I'm Dominic Gaso and I'm presenting the Chapter 8 Communication Systems. For this scope, this article covers the telephone, telegraph, except radio, outside wiring for fire alarm, and burglar alarm, and similar central station systems, and telephone systems not connected to a central station system but using similar types of equipment, methods of installation, and maintenance. For Article 8.1.18, installation of equipment, this equipment are electrically connected to a telecommunications network shall be listed in installation equipment. For 8.1.21, access to electrical equipment behind panels designed to allow access. Um, this article, access to electrical equipment shall not be denied by an accumulation of wires and cables that prevents removal of panels, including suspended ceiling panels. For this article, 8.124, mechanical execution of work, this article, communication circuits and equipment shall be installed in a neat workmanlike manner. Uh, those cables installed exposed on the surface, ceilings, and side walls. It is supported by building structure in such manner that the cable will not damaged by normal building use. For this article, wires and cables outside and entering buildings. For article 821, overhead communications wire and cables. Um, Overhead communication wires and cables for entering buildings. For A, on poles and in span, where communications wires and cables and electric light or power conductors are supported by the same pole or run parallel to each and in span. The conditions described in 82.1a through 4. And for what number 1 is relative locations, the communications, and for number 2 attachment to cross arms and climbing space and clearance. For above groups, communications wires and cables shall have a vertical clearance of not less than 2,500 mm from all points of roofs above they pass. For 824 underground circuits, underground communications wires and cables enter buildings with with electric light and power conductors. These underground communication wires and cables in a raceway, handhold and enclosure or manhole containing electric light power, class 1 or non-power limited fire alarm circuit conductors shall be in a section separated from such conductors by means of brick, concrete, or tile portions by means of suitable barrier. And then for letter B, underground block distribution, where the entire street or circuit is run underground and the circuit within the block is placed so as to be free from likelihood of accidental contact with electric light or power circuits of over 3,000 volts to ground. And next for this article, 8, 802, 8027 circuits requiring primary protectors. And this article, circuits require primary protectors as provided in section 83.1 shall comply with the following. For A, insulation wires and cables. These communication wires and cables without metallic shield running from the last out there support to the primary protectors shall be listed. And for the buildings, communications, wires, and cables shall be separated at least 100 millimeters from electric light or power conductors. And for entering buildings where primary protector is installed inside the building, the communication wire and cables shall enter the building through non-combustible and non-absorbent insulating bushing or through a metal raceway. For Article 0210, for lightning conductors, where practicable, a separation of at least 100 mm shall be maintained between communication wires and cables on buildings and lightning conductors. For protection, for protective devices, for application, a listed primary protector shall be provided on each circuit run partly or entirely aerial wire or aerial cable confined within the block. And it is shall be protected on circuit area, aerial or underground by locating within the block containing a building served to be exposed accidental contact with electric light and power operating over 300 volts on the ground. For 8.3.4 for cable grounding, metallic sheet of communication cables entering buildings shall be grounded as close as practicable to the point of entrance or shall be interrupted as close to the point of entrance practicable by an insulating joint or equivalent device. And then for these grounding methods, for 8.41 cable and primary protector grounding, we have metallic members of the cable sheet required to be grounded by 8.3.4 and primary protectors for grounding conductor and for insulation. The grounding conductor shall be insulated and shall be listed for the purpose. And for the material, the grounding conductor shall be copper on corrosion resistant conductive material, stranded or solid. And for the size is not smaller than 2 mm squared and 1.6 mm diameter. And for the length, this primary protector grounding conductor should be shorted as a practicable, and it is not exceeded at 6,000 millimeters in length. And for run in a straight line, grounding conductor should be run to the grounding electrode in as straight as line practicable. And for physical damage, where necessarily, grounding conductors shall be grounded against the physical damage, and both ends of the raceway shall be bonded to the grounding conductor or the same terminal electrode to which grounding conductor is connected. For communications, wires and cables within buildings, and for Article 8.5.1, raceways, communications, wires and cables, where communication wires and cables are installed in a raceway. And for 8.5.4, installation and marking communications wire and cables, listed communication wires and cables and listed multipurpose cables shall be installed as wiring within buildings. For Article 8.5.4, installation of communications wires and cables and equipment, and these communication wires and cables from protector to equipment where no protector is required. And first is separation from other conductors, cable trays, support of conductors, wiring in ducts or dust, loose stock or bay for removal. And then for 8 Article 80545 applications of listed communications, wires and cables and communication raceways. Communications wires and cables where cable substitutions are made for plenum, riser, distribution frames, and cross-connect arrays, cable trays, and other wiring within buildings. And then for the equipment, communications equipment shall be listed in a suitable for electrical communication connection to a telecommunication networks. And then we have primary protectors and secondary connect protectors. And then for these primary protectors, this protector shall consist of an arrestor connected with between each line conductor and grounded in an appropriate mounting. And then this for secondary protectors, this secondary protector shall be listed to a suitable to provide means to safety limit currents and less than the current carrying capacity. And then for drop wire and cable, communications wires and cables without metallic shield running from the last outdoor support to a primary protector shall be listed as being suitable for the purpose and shall have current carrying capacity. And then this Article 8.610 Communications wire and cables. This communication wire and cable shall have voltage not less than 300 volts. And then conductors and cables other than coaxial cable shall be coppered. And then we having different types of communication wires and cables. The type CMP used for environmental air, CMR being suitable for using vertical run, and then CMG general purpose, and also CM, and then type CMX thus in dwellings for use in raceway, and then type CMUC under carpet wire and cable, and then multi-purpose cables, and then communication circuit integrity cable to ensure survivability of critical circuits, and then communication wires, the distribution frame wire and jumper wire, and hybrid power communication cables. And then we have communication raceways for Article 8.6.13, and then for A, plenum communication raceways. These plenum raceways are optical fiber raceways shall be permitted for the use of ducts, plenums, and other spaces used for environmental air and also be listed in adequate fire resistant. And then for riser, um, this riser communication shall be listed having adequate fire resistant characteristics. And then for general purpose communications in raceway, this general purpose communication raceway shall be listed as having adequate fire resistant also characteristics. And then for Article 8.10 radio and television equipment, this scope, this Article 8.10.1, this is scope. This article covers antenna systems for radio and television receiving equipment, amateur radio transmitting and receiving equipment, and certain features of transmitter safety. This article covers antennas such as multi-element, vertical rod, and disc, and also covers the wiring and cabling that connects them to equipment. This article does not cover the equipment of antennas used for coupling carrier current to power line conductors. And for this article 10.1.4, communicate television antenna. The antenna shall be comply with this article, the distribution system. And for article 8.10.1.5, radio noise suppressors, radio interference eliminators, interference capacitors or noise suppressors connected to power supply, leads shall be listed type. They shall not be exposed to physical damage. This article 8.10.2, receiving equipment antenna systems, for the material, antennas and lead-in conductors shall be have a hard drawn copper, bronze size, aluminum alloy, copper, clad steel or other high strength corrosion resistant material. And for supports, outdoor antennas and lead-in conductors shall securely supported. And for Article 8.10.2.3, avoidance of contacts with conductors of other systems, outdoor antennas and lead-in conductors from antenna to a building shall not cross over conductors within electric light and power, and shall be kept away from all such circuits to avoid possibility accidental contact. And for this splices, Article 8.10.2.4, splices and joints in antenna span shall be made mechanically secured, and such as other means as will not applicably weaken the conductors. And for grounding, Article 8.10.2.5, mass and metal structures supporting antennas should be grounded. And we having Article 8.10.2.6, size of wire strung antenna receiving station. And for this table, for size antenna conductors shall be size not less than in 2.16. And then for supporting antennas, outdoor antennas such as vertical rods, dishes, or dipole structures. And then for this article 8.10.2.7, size of lead receiving station and lead conductors from outside antennas for receiving stations shall, for various maximum open span lengths, be such as size as to have tensile strength at least as great as of the conductors for antennas. For article 8.10.2.8, the clearances receiving stations, and we having outside of buildings leading conductions attached to the building. And for antennas, for indoor, the antenna is not be run nearer than 50 mm to conductor wiring systems. And then for inboxes or other enclosures, indoor antennas and indoor lead-ins shall be permitted to occupy the same box or enclosure with conductors. For Article 10.2.8, the electrical supply circuits used instead of antenna. Receiving stations where an electric supply circuit is used instead of an antenna, the device by which the radio receiving is set connected to the supply circuit shall be listed. And then for Article 10.2.10, antenna discharge units, receiving stations for requirements, each conductor of a lead-in from out the antenna shall be provided for discharge unit. For the locations, the antenna discharge unit shall be located outside the building or inside the building between a point of entrance. For the grounding, the antenna discharge unit shall be grounded by 8.10.2.11. For Article 8.10.3, amateur receiving, transmitting, and receiving stations, antenna systems for size of lead-in conductors. For transmitting the stations shall for various maximum span lengths be size at least as great as that conductor for antennas. For the clearance of the building, Article 8.10.3.4, the antenna conductors for transmitting stations that is attached to the buildings shall be firmly mounted at least 75 mm clear of the surface of the building, and it is non-absorbing insulating supports such as treated pins brackets equipment with the insulations having not less than 75 mm. For entrance of the buildings, except where protected with a continuous metallic shield that is permanently and effectively grounded, lead-in conductors for transmitting stations shall enter buildings. And then for Article 8.10.3.6, protection against accidental contact, the lead-in conductors to radio transmitters shall be located or is installed to make accidental contact with them difficult. For Article 8.10.3.7, antenna discharge units, transmitting stations, um, each conductor lead-in for outdoor antennas shall be provided with an antenna discharge unit or other suitable means that will drain static discharges from antenna system. For Article 8.10.3.8, grounding conductors are amateur transmitting and receiving stations. For grounding conductors, um, all grounding conductors for amateur transmitting and receiving stations shall comply with 8.10 and 2K. And for B, size of protective grounding conductor. The protective grounding conductor for transmitting stations shall be large as lead-in, but not smaller than 5.5 millimeter squared and 2.6 or 2.6 millimeter diameter. For size of operating grounding conductor, the conductor for transmitting stations shall not less than 2 mm squared or 1.6 millimeter diameter. For interior installations, transmitting stations, for this article, all conductors inside buildings shall be separated at least 100 mm from the conductors of any electrical, light, power, oscillating circuit. For Article 8.2, Community Antenna Television and Radio Distribution Systems. For this article, for energy limitations, coaxial cables shall be permitted to deliver energy power to equipment that is directly associated with radio frequency distribution system if the voltage is not over 60 volts, and the current supply from transformer that has energy limiting characteristics. For Article 8.20.1.21, access to electrical equipment behind panels designed to allow access. Access to electrical equipment shall not denied by accumulation of wires cables that prevents removal of panels, including suspended ceiling panels. For Article 8.20.1.24 for mechanical execution of work, community antenna television and distribution systems should be installed in a neat, workmanlike manner. For cables outside and entering buildings, overhead cables, coaxial cables before point of grounding. For underground circuits entering buildings, these underground systems, coaxial cables in a duct, pedestal, handhole enclosure, or manhole that contains electric light or power conductors, or Class 1 shall be in section permanently, and for direct buried cables and raceways, it is not least 300 mm from conductors of any light or power. For the protection, grounding outer conductor shield, the outer shall be grounded at the building premises as close to the point to cable entrance or attachment practicable. For equipment grounding, unpowered equipment and enclosures of equipment powered by coaxial cable shall be considered grounded where connected metallic shield. For the bonding and grounding at mobile homes, for grounding where there is no mobile home services, not more than 9,000 mm from the exterior wall, there is no home disconnecting means grounded accordance with 2.50 to 0.2.13, and the site from not more than 9,000 from the exterior wall, home services coaxial cable sheet ground. For bonding, the coaxial cable for terminal surge, the arrestor grounding terminal, is not smaller than 3.5 mm squared. For cable within buildings, the raceways for coaxial cables, where coaxial cables are installed in a raceway, the raceway shall be either of type permitted in Chapter 3. For the Article 8.20.5.2, the installation of marking coaxial cables, listed coaxial cables shall be listed with the wiring buildings. And we have listing requirements. The type CAT VP for the antenna communication plenum cable, and it is used for environmental air. For CAT VR, the riser cable for vertical run. For type CAT V, community antenna television cable for general purpose. For CAT VX, it is used for dwellings and used for raceway. And for Article 8.20.6.4, CAT V raceways, we have plenum, riser, and general purpose raceways. And then for Article 8.3, Article 8.30, network powered broadband communication systems. For the scope, Article 8.30.1.1 scope. This article covers the network-powered broadband communication systems that provide any combination of voice, audio, video, data, and interactive services through network and interface unit. For Article 8.30.1.24 for mechanical execution of work, this network-powered broadband communications, and it is shall be installed in the neat or workmanlike manner. And those cables installed from exposed surface ceilings or sidewalls, and it is supported by structure in such a manner that cable will not damage. And those cables shall secured by straps, hangers, or similar fittings designed and store the not damage to the cable. For Article 8.30.2, cables outside and entering buildings. For this article, for entrance cables, the cables installed outdoors shall be listed in suitable for the applications. For medium power circuits, this medium power network powered by a broadband communications, it is located from outside and entering building. We have a type of BMU, BM, BMR, and this is a medium power cables. For low power, for this low power circuits, this is located outside and entering buildings also, and they are installed using BLU or type BLX for powered broadband communication cables. And then for aerial article 8.30.2.5, the aerial cables, aerial network powered broadband communications cables for poles where practicable powered broadband communication cables on poles shall be located below the electric light power and not non-power limited fire alarm circuits conductors, and it shall not attach to cross-arm carries or for electric light and power conductors. And then for climbing space, this climbing space through network broadband communication cables. For clearance, lead in and aerial drop network powered broadband communications. This is from pole or support including the point of initial attachment of to building or structure should be kept away from light and power or class 1 or non-power limited fire alarm circuits to avoid the possibility of accidental contact. And then we have clearances from the ground. For overhead spans network broadband communication cables, we have 2,900 millimeter. Those are finished grade. For this is from sidewalks and pedestrian only. And for 3,500 millimeter, this is from residential property and driveways. And for this 4,700 millimeter, this is from public streets, alleys, roads, and parking areas. And for overpulls, clearance of network powered broadband communications cable in any directions from water level, edge of pool, the base of the diving platform, and anchor raft. For the above groups, this network, the vertical clearance not less than 2,400 millimeters from all points of groups. And we have final spans. These final spans, the outer jacket shall be permitted attached to the building, but shall keep not less than 900 millimeters from windows. And these are designed to be open doors, porch, balconies, ladders, stairs, fire escapes, or similar locations. For other buildings, network power, broadband communications, cables, extending between buildings. These are supports or attachments features shall be acceptable, and it is sufficient strength to withstand the loads to which they may be subjected. And we have on the buildings, were attached to buildings, network power, broadband communications, cables shall be securely fastened in such a manner that they will be separated from other conductors. Um, we having electric light or power. This electric light or power, this network powered broadband cable shall have separated from 100 millimeter from electric light and power. And for other communication systems, this cable shall be installed. There will be no unnecessary interference in a maintenance of a separate systems. For lighting conductors, where practicable, a separation from at least 1800 millimeters shall be maintained between any network-powered broadband communications. For protection from damage, this network-powered broadband communication cables to buildings shall be located in 2400 millimeters of finish grade, shall be protected by enclosures, raceways, and other approved means. For this underground circuits entering buildings, we are having underground systems. These cables are in the dark pedestrian handholds and closures from circuits shall be sectioned permanently separated from such conductors by means of a suitable barrier. For direct bird cables and raceways, these direct cables shall be separated at least 300 millimeters from conductors of any light power. And for mechanical protection from direct bird cable, we have minimum cover requirements. And this cable emerging from the ground shall be protected by enclosures, raceways, or other approved by means extended from the minimum cover distance. That's all. Thank you for listening about the chapter 8 communication systems. Thank you.